so that way I can share the answers with other classes. So it says read the text and the statements, use the text and the statements to help you label the diagram and answer the questions. So like I said, I'm going to go through level 1 questions and then the diagram. You can either write it down or you can minimize the zoom and type it right in. Just listen. The lungs are the main organs of respiration. Their job is to help gases, mainly oxygen and carbon dioxide, to trade places. So that's one of the first answers to the questions. When you inhale your lungs to take in the oxygen that your cells need, blood circulating the tissues of the lung take the oxygen to cells all over the body. At the same time, the blood has been collecting carbon dioxide waste from your cells. That waste goes into your lungs and you expel it when you exhale. So that answers question 1. The lungs are the main organs of respiration. The function of the lungs is to help gases trade places. That's answers 1 and 2. So I'll give you 30 seconds to type that in or write that down. The lungs are the main organs of respiration. Yes. What's up?
The answer to number 2 again?
Trade places.
Trade places?
Trade places. So it says the lungs are the main organs of respiration. Their job is to help gases to trade places. All right. The second paragraph is just an introduction. It's not necessarily used to answer any questions. In this gas exchange process, the lungs need the help from the muscles around the ribs, from a specialized muscle called the diaphragm, and from other structures and organs. Altogether, the lungs and these muscles and other structures and organs make up the respiratory system. So, at this point, if you did this packet and you got a good grade, you go get a snack or go to the bathroom, come back in 5 minutes. If you didn't do it or you got things wrong, pay attention. This statements answer all the questions. All the questions are answered in these statements, except for level 3. Level 3, you're kind of putting things together. So number 1 is going to answer question 3. The diaphragm is a large sheet-like muscle that divides the body cavity into 2 smaller cavities: the thoracic chest cavity, which contains the lungs and the heart is not shown in the diagram, and the abdominal cavity, which houses the organs and glands of digestion, excretion, and reproduction. Arrow A points to the thoracic cavity, and arrow B points to the abdominal cavity. So we would want to write that down. A, thoracic. B, abdominal. So if you ever have surgery on your chest in an ER, it would be a thoracic surgeon. They kind of are general catch-all surgeons. And then if you go down to number 3, the body cavity above the diaphragm is the thoracic cavity, and below the diaphragm is the abdominal cavity. So you can see we're not splitting atoms here. Now, the next question, number 4, what happens in the diaphragm when you breathe in? This is a tough question, and if you didn't read the paper, it's going to be hard, and that's going to be answered in statement number 2. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Again, the answer to number 3 was thoracic and abdominal, and we want to highlight or take notes. Arrow A is thoracic and arrow B is abdominal. So statement number 2, as you inhale, breathe in, the muscle fibers of the diaphragm contract and bulge downward, and the ribs move outward. Both these actions expand the thoracic cavity. So that is the answer to the next question. Andrew Marshall's back. To fill this empty space, say again?
Is that number 4?
I have to scroll down. I was going to finish reading the statement first. Both these actions expand the thoracic cavity. To fill this empty space, air rushes in through your nose, red blood cells pick up oxygen from the new air, and carbon dioxide leaves the blood and mixes with the air in the lungs. So if I scroll down, yes, that would be number 4. What happens in the diaphragm when you breathe in? The diaphragm contracts and bulges downward, and the ribs move outward. All right, I'll give 30 seconds. We're cruising right along. All right. So number 5, while we're down here, to reach the lungs, air follows a system of tubes and spaces called the respiratory pathway. And that's going to be answered in the next couple statements. All right, so first of all, let's get back to the diaphragm, because that's going to help us label a question and complete a level 2 question. As you exhale, breathe out, the diaphragm and the rib muscles relax. The diaphragm assumes its convex at-rest shape and now bulges upward, and the ribs move inward. Both these actions compress the air and force it out through the nose, expelling the carbon dioxide from the lungs. Arrow N points to the diaphragm. So you would want to write diaphragm down or go and label it. Okay. So number 4 is going to answer the next question. To reach the lungs, air from the atmosphere follows a system of tubes and spaces called the respiratory pathway, which begins at the nose. On either side of the nose are small openings called nostrils. As incoming air passes through the nose itself, small air, stiff hairs trap dust and other foreign particles. Arrow C points to the nose, but you probably would know that. So that was an easy one. So if you go down, that answers number 5. To reach the lungs, air follows the systems of tubes and spaces called respiratory pathway. So number 6, while we're here, that's going to be answered in the next statement. What happens to incoming air as it passes through the nose? It is warmed and moistened and filtered. And that's going to be answered in the next statement. So you can see how this, you're like, man, this is kind of boring or a joke. Yeah, it would have been great if you did this on your own. As incoming air passes through the nose itself, small stiff hairs trap dust and other foreign particles. You can answer that. Okay. Directly behind the nose, within the bone of the skull, is a space called the nasal cavity. It is lined with membrane, contains specialized cells that release a thick, clear liquid called mucus. Yummy. Mucus and mucous membrane help to warm and moisturize the air. Sorry. Arrow D points to the nasal cavity. So you would want to write that down. And so we can label it later, or you can go label it now. So again, the next question, what happens to incoming air as it passes through the nose? It is clean and filtered, warmed and moistened. And how is the air warmed and moistened as it passes through the nasal cavity? It is moistened by mucus and mucous membranes. So we're really supposed to breathe through our nose and out through our mouth. Like I'm an habitual mouth breather because my nose, I had a deviated septum my whole life. I got surgery a couple years ago. So I can finally breathe through my nose, but I have to consciously think about it. Any questions? That was 1 through 7. Anybody missing any? All right, number 8. What is the job of the conchae? And that sounds like a seafood you might have had in the Caribbean. Additional fluid number 6. Additional fluid drains into the nasal cavity from the sinuses, which are also lined with mucous membranes. Like the nasal cavity, the sinuses are spaces in the bones of the skull. There are sinuses above and below the eyes. If you have allergies, you know that sometimes your mucous membranes can swell and prevent your sinuses from draining, causing pressure to build up and give you a sinus headache. Arrow E points to the frontal sinus. So that will also answer a level 2 question. And so that's something you might want to highlight or star so you can come back to and answer it later. So number 7, we're going to really start moving now. On the walls in the nasal cavity are 3 rounded plates that look like scrolls. They are called conchae, plural for concha. Your job is to form channels that direct air into a space called the pharynx. When you open your mouth and look out your throat in a mirror, you'll see a dangling piece of tissue called the uvula. The space behind the uvula is the oral pharynx. Arrow F points to the conchae. G points to the pharynx. And notice pharynx is with a PH. Locate these arrows on the diagram and label them. So you can write those down or highlight that. And the job of the conchae is to direct air to the pharynx. So number 9 is a question a lot of students get wrong. So this is why we have to go over this. Because it's a simple question. All right. So the pharynx directs air into the larynx. When you swallow, you can see the larynx move in your neck. This protruding part of the larynx is sometimes called the Adam's apple, but that's not what the larynx is called. Okay, girls don't have an Adam's apple. All right, boys do. Why? I don't know. All right, another name for the larynx is the voice box. Okay, that answers the next question. We do not call the larynx the Adam's apple. Okay, some people might find that insulting. Inside it are the vocal cords. That will answer the next question. Thin bands of tissue that vibrate when exhaled, air rushes past them. This enables you to make sounds when you speak or sing. Arrow H points to the larynx. All right, so we want to go down. Let's go to answer a couple questions. The larynx is also called the voice box. What structures are in the larynx? The vocal cords. Okay. So 9 is the voice box, 10 is the vocal cords. Any questions?
Why do people get number 9 mixed up?
Because it says that the protruding part of the larynx is sometimes called the Adam's apple. So they put that down and don't put the voice box, and that's wrong. That's it. They're reading quickly, trying to get it done. That's a simple mistake that we need to clear up, and that's why we take Introduction to Healthcare if we go in healthcare, so you're not embarrassed someday. That's, if anything, I'm sparing you embarrassment someday. All right. Any other questions? All right. So number 9, the larynx has a flap of tissue called the epiglottis. That protects its opening. When you swallow, this flap closes, make a slight noise that you can hear. The purpose of this flap is to prevent food from entering and blocking the respiratory pathway. I points to the epiglottis. So we would run and write that down. And I don't believe that answers any statements yet. From the larynx, air passes into a large tube called the trachea or windpipe. Trachea is about 4.5 inches long. It is protected by the rings of cartilage that help keep it open, so the air could travel freely through it freely. So here's the larynx. Your trachea is from here to here. If you had your video open, you could see that. But so that's going to answer the next 2 questions. J is the trachea. So from the larynx, air passes into a tube about 4.5 inches long called the trachea. What keeps this tube open so that air can pass freely through it? Rings of cartilage. Does anybody have any questions? And we're almost done reading. Then we'll skip down to the diagram and go through that. So if you checked out, make sure you check back in, pay attention to this. Trachea branches to make 2 smaller tubes called bronchi, plural bronchus, which directs air into the lungs. Arrow K points to the left bronchus. Can you have a right one? Okay. The bronchi divide to make smaller tubes called bronchioles. Bronchioles, the trachea and the bronchi are lined with small hair-like structures called cilia. That's going to answer a question. We'll go answer those questions in a second. Cilia wave back and forth as they trap foreign particles and push them back toward the throat or pharynx. Arrow L points to the bronchioles. Okay? Label arrow L bronchioles. So, the bronchi divide to make smaller tubes called bronchioles. That's what OLES means, smaller. These smaller tubes are lined with hair-like structures called cilia. Cilia is C-I-L-I-A. It does not begin with an S. It's not very silly. But then when you get tickled, you might laugh or sneeze. And number 15 is the last statement. Bronchioles continue to divide, making smaller and smaller tubes. They may divide up to 20 times before becoming air ducts. Because these divisions are so small, they may not have been included on the diagram. Air ducts are minute tubes that direct air into small thin sacs called alveoli. Sounds like ravioli. The plural of alveolus. Collectively, the alveoli are sometimes called the respiratory membrane because respiratory gases diffuse through these thin sacs while entering and leaving the blood. Arrow M points to alveoli. That's how you answer the diagram. That's why it would have taken you some time to do. All right, I cannot let you fail that if you're going into healthcare. Collectively, the alveoli are sometimes called the respiratory membrane. Make sure you check your spelling. Okay, respiratory is R-E-S-P-I-R-A-T-O-R-Y. So these number 16 and 17 and 18 questions, they're pretty involved. And you can answer those on your own. 19, 20, and 21, you would want to do research and cite your work if you don't know the answers. I expect full sentences. What I want to do is make sure we know the diagram, okay? So you should have had written those down, and you need to type those in. There's about 8 minutes left in class, so we're going to go do that. F is the conchae, C-O-N-C-H-A-E. So you want to use the text box and type that in, conchae. E, so you could have the Zoom minimized and you be typing in, excuse me, E is the frontal sinus. E is the frontal sinus. And I think you know what C is. C is the nose. So it doesn't, anatomy doesn't necessarily go in chronological order. I can make an order out of this for you. Y does not do that because we're flattening on a piece of paper and we're trying to fit lines in. So that makes it challenging. But you want to maybe take a picture of this when we're done because you're going to need it for your work Wednesday. C is the nose. H is the larynx. H is the larynx. A is the thoracic cavity. And notice there's two C's in thoracic. The delcoists want to say thoracic. It's not thoracic, it's thoracic. And B is abdominal. And again, abdominal is A-B-D-O-M-I-N-A-L. So A is thoracic, B is abdominal. Does anybody have any questions on the right side or your left side of the diagram? All right, we're almost done. D is the nasal cavity. And G is the pharynx. D is the nasal cavity. G is the pharynx.
How do you spell pharynx?
P-H-A-R-Y-N-X. And that's important. That's a good question. It's like Sphinx. When you hear that inks, it's often Y-N-X. I is the epiglottis. I is the epiglottis. Any other questions? All right, we're almost done. I know this is probably as dry as a piece of stale bread, but we want to get through this. It's good to know as a functioning adult this stuff too, because you'll be parents someday and you want to know what the doctors are talking about. J is trachea. J is the trachea. K is the left bronchus. So there's a right bronchus, it's just not labeled. L is the bronchioles. Oh, those bronchioles. Get those bronchioles.
So, did you take points off for, because I remember when I did this, I just put bronchus instead of left bronchus. Did
Probably
you
not. I probably did not take points off for that.
I didn't look at it yet, but.
Yeah, I probably didn't take points off for that. L is bronchioles. M is alveoli. Sounds like ravioli. Alveoli. And that's plural for alveolus. And they're the little grape hollowed out sacs I probably talked about last Monday. We could take them and spread them out from a person and they would cover like a volleyball court or a classroom floor. By being spherical shape, they have more surface area to absorb more gas. And N, as in Nike, is the diaphragm. And that's what separates our chest cavity and belly. Our thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity is the diaphragm. That's a very important muscle. And that is level 1 and level 2 questions. I'm sorry, level 1 and the diagram. So that's a wrap. You guys need to make up your work and do your work, or as indicated by or directed by our illustrious administration. We have to contact your parents, invite them to parent conference night, or have a talk with them, which will probably get you in trouble. Sorry. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to check the chat room. Some people bailed out, I understand. Does anybody have any questions?
Are we going over the level 2 and level 3, or is that something we're doing on our own?
I'm going to go over level 2 and level 3 questions now. You guys can bail out if you want. Okay. Have a good day. I'll see you Wednesday. If you want to stay on to go through those questions, you're welcome to stay on. All right. So, level 2 questions. How does the diaphragm help to bring air into the lungs? And that is from the statements up here. You can summarize statements 2 and 3, or you could retype them all. To breathe in, the muscle fibers of the diaphragm contract and bulge downward, and the ribs move outward to expand the thoracic cavity. When we breathe out, the diaphragm and rib muscles relax, and the ribs move inward, compressing the air and forcing it out. So that you're taking statements 2 and 3 and you're summarizing them and putting them together for that level 2 question. So you can understand why I didn't want to bore the whole class on that. That's an important concept that you will definitely get in advanced biology, AP Bio, medical careers, or in college or technical school. Does anybody need me to repeat the answer to number 16?
The breathe out part, I didn't get that.
Okay, so the breathe out part, again, the diaphragm and the rib muscles relax. And the diaphragm assumes its convex shape and the ribs move inward. So the diaphragm and ribs muscles relax and assume a convex shape and the ribs move inward. That compresses the air and forces it out. Take a deep breath. All right. I'm going to move on to 17. That's fairly straightforward. That was in a statement. The sinuses are spaces in the bones of the skull. These are the sinuses and below the eyes, above and below the eyes. Here it is. If you have allergies, you know that sometimes your mucous membranes can swell and prevent your sinuses from draining, causing pressure to build up and give you a sinus headache. If you have allergies or a cold, your mucous membranes can swell and prevent your sinuses from draining, causing pressure to build up and give you a sinus headache. Allergies and infections cause your sinus membranes to swell, and the fluid buildup causes pressure, and that's a sinus headache. All right, number 18. The alveoli are sometimes called the respiratory membrane because they allow gases to trade places. They allow gases to trade places. Now, for 19 through 21, I would like you guys to think about that or research it. I'm not going to answer it here. I will go over them directly in different lessons. So remember, the cilia help filter out dust, pollen, particles, viruses, and bacteria for 19. For 20, remember your alveoli are a thin membrane. So that is an issue. And for 21, that's definitely going to require some research or some deep thought. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on 16, 17, and 18? All right. Stop sharing. At that point, I'm done for today. I have to go be available for my async classes. Holly, do you have any questions?
For number 21, you said that that one has to do research.
Yeah, you're going to have to do some research. That's going to be a challenging question.
And then what did you say for number 19?
Cilia, they're the small like hairs that trap dust and particles, bacteria and pollen. So you could probably think about that. You know, if they're damaged, what are they not going to be able to do?
They won't be able to help filter the air.
Right, there you go. Any other questions?
My last thing is, with the comment that you sent last week, you said you're doing it on Cami whether you like it or not. That was for everybody. It wasn't for me, was it?
No, that's for everybody.
I was like, what did I do?
Now, you got to look at the header. Unless it says to Holly Saber, it's going to say to the class.
I did look at that, but it said to me and to you. I didn't see anybody else on there.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happens then, but that was to the class. And I'm trying to remember to write to the class in there. Yeah. And the only other thing, if people don't want to do Cami, they got to print it out or write the answers out in notes and take a picture and send it to me.
That's what I'm doing.
Good idea.
I cannot stand scrolling up and down. It just bothers me.
Well, that's what the other option is, to take a picture of the Cami, right? Or print it out like you did and then type it in.
I printed out to search for the answers and typed.
That's fine. That's great. There's a lot of ways to feed this horse. All right. Are you good?
I'm good now.
All right. Well, I'll see you Wednesday.
Okay.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.